Roberto.
Okay. No, I just wanted to good evening to everybody, and I hope everybody's good and safe and healthy, guys. Thank you for logging in. We're lucky and fortunate to have Kate Norton. A lot of you guys know her on with us tonight. Kate is what I consider a good friend. Was fortunate enough to coach her as a player, and as a coach, she's got the same mentality as she did as a player, as a coach. So I know I learn a lot every time I'm with her. And her and I have a lot of good conversations. So I know you guys are going to learn a lot tonight. So we'll give the floor to Kate. And Kate, thank you again for being on tonight.
No, of course. And first and foremost, I hope everyone is safe and healthy and in a good physical and mental mindset. So Walter and Roberto and Javi, thanks so much for having me on. This is exciting for me. I consider Tucson to be my second home, and anytime I can have a connection with Tucson, especially in a soccer capacity, it's an absolute pleasure and privilege. So just a super quick little background on me is that I consider myself a soccer nerd. That does not mean that I think I am the smartest person when it comes to soccer, but I love soccer. The family that I'm in is all about soccer. We eat, breathe, and sleep soccer. So this for me is exciting. So I hope that you enjoy it. And also I don't bore you for the next 30, 40 minutes. So at any point in time, feel free to ask a question. We can stop. I don't want this to be a lecture. That sounds pretty boring. I'd much rather this be kind of I'll lead a discussion on what we're talking about. But I want to start with, I want this to be a safe place to ask questions, and you guys have to commit to that, whether it could be something I've already said and you want me to repeat it, or you think it's a silly question, or any and all of the above. If we can all commit to making this a safe learning environment, then I think we're all better for it. So, but that's going to take both you guys asking questions and you guys supporting each other and people feeling comfortable asking questions. So let me share my screen and we'll get going. I think I want to share that one. Okay, you can see it. Walter, thumbs up. All right, good.
Yes, we can see it. Thanks, Kate.
So 2 goals for me today within this little presentation is we're going to talk about systems of play. We're also going to veer off into different directions, but I want one of 2 things to happen, or 2 things to happen, whether it's you see something new and you learn something new and you're like, oh, that's cool, I didn't really think about that, or wow, that's brand new. Or the second part would be you've kind of heard of it, but now you have some clarity and you have a little higher understanding of it. And for me, that goes both ways. So if I'm showing you something and you have an idea of, hey, could you do it this way or that way, I want to learn from you guys as well. Because like I said, I am a soccer nerd, and part of that makes it that I always want to learn. And I've learned a significant amount from working with Walter and playing for Roberto and working with Roberto. And I learn a lot from my kids, and I know Amy's on here and I've learned a lot from her, and I saw some familiar names on there. So let's do this together and let's learn some new stuff together. So I'm going to talk about systems of play with an emphasis on a 1-4-3-3. So systems of play for me is pretty much the framework for the game. I could get into a lengthy multiple day conversation argument about the difference between formations, systems of play, style of play, and all those things. But I'm going to try to do my best to somewhat stay in my lane of systems of play. So we're going to go over 3 separate things in terms of field designation, relationships and expectations, and positional and group responsibilities within a 1-4-3-3. So the first bit is, some people call them zones, some people call them areas, designations, whatever you want to call it. But this is the first slide for me because this to me puts you guys in a position to have a common language. So that to me is really important as a coach, being in a club, whether you coach the U19 team or the U9 team, and whether you've been in the club since U9 to U15, everyone has the same common language. So that can be as simple as, if you have the ball and your coach wants you to dribble, it could be drive or it could be dribble at speed. But if you can make sure that everyone's on the same page, it makes your learning process even more efficient. So you can break a field up. I don't even know what the number would be. There's 100 different ways you can break a field up to ensure that you're on the same page. And it could be as simple as, it can be color coordinated, which I love color coordinating things. So I saw this at one of the jobs I was in the past couple years. And so they broke the field up into colors. So there was a red zone, a yellow zone, and a green zone. And if you're talking about the attacking phase, there's 4 phases. Within the attacking phase, if you're in the red zone, you take limited risk on the ball. So in possession, when you have it, you know when you're in the red zone, and you can close your eyes when you're on the, oh, I'm on the red zone, I need to take limited risk, let's play it safe. And then when you're in the yellow zone, it's medium risk. And you say, okay, I can take a little bit more risk here. Maybe I can take someone on. Maybe I'm doing this, that, or the other. And then in the green zone, it's have at it, be an individual, do your thing. And then it can also be broken up vertically into different channels or seams or gates. People call them different things. The middle field, it's, when you go vertically, it's numbers. So phase 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and then you have zone A, B, C, and D. And then there's some people that are much smarter than I am. I can't process or remember or retain this information, but some people, it's pretty popular, break the field up into 18 zones. So they'll say, hey, when you're in zone 10, or you're going from 7 to 10, so on and so forth. But again, that just puts you on the same page as your teammates and your coaches. And if a different coach comes and coaches you for that training session or for that game, then everyone knows. They're going to say, hey, today's emphasis at training is going to be on the yellow zone in the central channel. Great. Or, if you look at the far left, there's these 2 kind of give it away half channels, right? Where it might just be, this is the wide channel, this is the central channel, this is the right channel, left, right, central, whatever. But then you have these little half spaces. So if you're a 7 or you're 11, and we're going to talk about positional responsibilities, your coach might say, hey, when we lose it on the weak side, you need to drop into the half space. And you in your head know, because you have this little field memorized, you go, okay, I drop in an angle, I know where I need to be, so on and so forth. But this to me is just so important to make sure that you have that common language and everyone knows how the field is broken down. And it could very simply be defensive third, middle third, attacking third. You heard Roberto talk about it last week in terms of thirds. You can number them, you can letter them, but I always try to find new ways, or to ask people how they do it, what they do at their club, how national teams do it, how pro teams do it. Anybody, girls, boys, doesn't matter. So this is just something to consider and to ensure you're on the same page, and again, have that common language. All right. So let's get into the nitty gritty of it. When it comes to systems of play, it doesn't matter to me, and these are my opinions. These are not Surf's opinions or University of Arizona's opinions or Region 4 opinion, whatever. These are just, this is a very basic 4-3-3, how I would play it if I had to take a new team today and play on Saturday. So if this differs from what your coach is telling you, doesn't mean that they're wrong or I'm wrong. It's just a different lens. And I think these types of meetings are fantastic for that, because you get to see a 4-3-3 through my lens. And Roberto and I were talking before this, and he's saying, oh, well, I know this this coach plays it this way and that coach plays it this way. And then those relationships change. But getting back to the point, I think that every system of play, whether it's a 3-5-2, a 4-2-3-1, a 4-4-2 box, 4-4-2 diamond, has 5 major relationships. Okay. And I'm assuming in your head, you can say, well, Kate, what about the 6 being connected to the 10? Yeah, they 100% should be, but these are the 5 main relationships. So we talk about the 4 and the 5 have to have that relationship of balance. Okay. And then you have your 3 and your 11, and it's the same with the 2 and the 7. If they go, if the 11 goes, the 3 has to go. And then so on and so forth. They're almost tied with the rope, and that creates a relationship. And then the 2 10s kind of create that balance. And I didn't put any lines on this field just so you could see it clearly, because if you start to put too many lines, I get confused. And then you have the 6 and the 9. So here's where I want to start to get some group participation. Why do you think that 6 and the 9 are connected? Why would that be? You can use it in any phase. So it could be attacking, defending, defending to attack, attack to defend. However you want to answer the question, why do you think the 6 and the 9 are connected? Anybody brave enough to give it a go? If not, then I have to call on Walter. So no one's brave enough? Ooh, there's a blinking. Well, I don't know what that means. There was one blinking. No one?
Yeah, Mario.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mario.
Hey, Mario.
I would say for balls over the top of the defense.
Okay, so if the 9 is pressing, so can you elaborate I don't want to answer it. Can you so I'll start to talk and get excited. So can you elaborate a little bit on that? Why the 6 would be connected to the 9? Why is that a main relationship?
If the 9 makes a run behind the defense and the 6 has the ball, he could play a long ball into space.
Yep, so that's an attacking phase. So the 6 has the ball, and maybe that's kind of their first look, because if the 9 is the highest player, that could be the most dangerous ball. Anybody else? I saw thank Mario 1, thank you, and 2, good answer. Anybody else?
Josue. Go ahead, Josue.
If there's a corner and the 6 gets the ball off the corner, there could be a counterattack. He could play it to the 9, and there could be a counterattack.
Perfect. So again, if that 6 wins the ball, now we're talking about a transitional moment. That 9 most likely is probably going to be the highest player. Anybody have any guesses, not a guess, any answers on why they might be connected defensively?
Jules, I know you've stated something here, but she would like to know something that's defensive. Jules. Jules, are you there?
If the 9 gets beat, then the 6 can push up and help the other midfielders.
Okay, I think you're definitely onto that. So I think it's creating that balance, right? So when we don't have the ball and we're deciding how we want to press, so it could be a high press, it could be a mid block press, it could be a low block press. And into the next slides, I'll talk a little bit of, you're on the right track there. So I think it's just important that 9 always is stepping to the ball, and then the 6 is now screening and keeping that connection and that balance. Because if you have if you're saying that if the 9 steps into this space and the 6 slides all the way over, now we're susceptible to someone changing the point of attack or kind of countering us in that way, excuse me. So we talk a lot about our 6s have to see one and screen one. So they need to see the player in front of them and screen someone behind them. That would most likely be the 9, but they also always have to know where the 9 is, because in this system of play with a 4-3-3, the 9 usually sets the press. It's like spelling, there's always exceptions. But the 9 in most cases usually will step and set the press. And then as that 9 steps into this space, now the 11 steps. And as the 11 steps, the 3 says, yep, that's my main relationship, I step. And when that 9 steps, now the 6, like you said, then has to push everybody up. So spot on. Paul Nagy's not on this call, but I always try to give him respect. And the 6th relationship is the goalkeeper. So there are 5 major relationships. If you want to be picky, we can say 6 because of the goalkeepers, but the goalkeepers are usually connected to the center backs. And that's the same if you play a 3-back, 4-back, 5-back, whatever you want, but their main relationship is usually with the 4 and the 5. And again, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't know where the 6 is, or they're not talking to the 2s and 3s and tucking them in and so on and so forth, but that's their main relationship. Does anyone have any questions on these relationships? I would challenge you that if you play a 4-3-3 or a 4-4-2 or whatever formation or style of play or system of play that you have within your team, is that you challenge yourself to go, okay, here's what I think our relationships are. And you might come up with 6, you might come up with 7, that's okay. But this is also really important for when you're, if you're not starting, or maybe it's the second half and you're on the bench and you're paying attention, and most of us say, okay, I'm the 2, I know I'm playing right back, and Walter's on for me, but I'm going to watch Walter and see what he's doing well and see what he can improve on, so when I go in, I'm ready to go. The next step to that, the next step in your progression of learning and preparing yourself for the game and being the best teammate you can be, is go, okay, if I'm the 3 and Roberto's playing the 3, I should also be watching who very closely. How is his relationship with the 11 going? Is it, and then at halftime, maybe the conversation is, hey, 3, hey, Roberto and Javi, you guys are playing the 3 and the 11 in the attacking third, getting back to that common language, or if you go back in zone, in A, where we get into phase 4, you guys need to be more connected. And we talk a lot about our 3 and our 11 never being more than 1 phase away. So we call these phases, okay? So I don't want the 3 to be in phase 1 and the 11 to be in phase 4, because then we're too stretched out. So if we're playing a scrimmage or whatever it is, I might just say, hey, how's your relationship? Or we do a lot of transitional games where it might be 4v4 +2 and it would be kind of the 2 goalkeepers would be the targets, and then you have 4v4, and then I try to be very intentional with those 2 neutral players, and they're usually 10s, and we talk a lot about being offset, so not in the same vertical line and not in the same horizontal line. But sometimes if they're struggling with that a little bit, all I have to say, and again goes back to the common language thing, is, hey, Kira, relationship. And then she'll look and she'll see Mac and she goes, oh, okay, I just have to move over here. And she sees it and she solves the problem. But again, it's that common language. And then at halftime, I might say, hey, Mac and Kira, you guys are both getting pulled in to the same half space or half channel, or you're both occupying B, but we also need to make sure our 10s are in different lines as well. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions on that? Or thoughts or things that you want to bring to my attention that maybe you disagree with these relationships and you think it should be something else? We argue about this stuff all the time in a very good way. Like we have our 3-5-2 and our 4-4-2, and we say, no, these are the 5 main relationships. No, these are the 5 main relationships. So I am open to suggestions or friendly arguments. Anybody? Walter, do you agree with my relationships?
Yeah, I agree with your relationships. I think it's important, the 9 and the 6, something that just keeps the team more compact. I think that's a really important relationship that people overlook, and coaches as well. Like for me, I'm just looking at this going, yeah, duh, just to keep the entire system much more compact, and the relationships one to another is also really important. And like you stated, just to solve problems, you need to be able to have a common language and understanding of responsibilities.
Cool. Okay. So let's look at this next little diagram here. So I would love to present all 11 positions, but Roberto said he said 30 minutes, but I'm just going to keep saying 30 to 40 minutes. So right here, we're talking about the 4 and the 5. So those are the 2 center backs. The shaded area here is the area in which they're most likely going to cover. So it's the common ground covered between the 2 of them. It doesn't mean if they go into this green area here that it's lava, or you're going to get screamed at if R4 somehow ends up over here. It's not the end of the world, but this is kind of the main part of the field that they cover. And for each position, I have kind of designated that for you. So it doesn't mean that they can't get into the box for whatever reason, because they're going to go up for set pieces and so on and so forth. But this is in the run of play. And for each position, I let my players know, like, hey, if you're a 3, here's the area that you cover. If you're a 2, here's the area that you cover. And it goes back to your system of play. because like I said, you can play a 4-3-3 with one holding mid, and you can play it 6 different ways. Some people like to have their 7 and their 11s tucked in. Some people like to pin them wide, so on and so forth. And if they're pinned wide, then that might change the area of the field that they most occupy. And then I've kind of separated this in terms of responsibilities and expectations. So again, to the 4 phases, again, color coordinated, just to make sure it's easy to understand. So if you're a 4 or a 5 and you play for me on a team that I'm coaching, so Alyssa and Isabel play center back for the 05 team that I talk about, that I coach. We talk about these responsibilities. So in the attacking phase, they are expected to maintain possession. They are expected to dictate the attack with ball movement. So last week, Roberto talked a lot about pressing in the attacking third. And I remember we had this conversation afterwards. This is what is so fascinating and great about soccer, is that he's saying, I would love for the other team to have their center backs and 6 on the ball. I would love for it. And in my head, I'm like, I would love to play a team that wants those players on the ball. So it's kind of that tactical system versus system. And then if you coach against me long enough, then you kind of understand my tendencies and how we play a 4-3-3. Then you can say, okay, fine. Now a lot of teams that we play against drop way off and they make us make decisions, right? Because our center backs we're very fortunate that they're very good on the ball, and they're very good at dictating the rhythm, almost like I think a lot of people want their 6s and 8s and 10s to do. Our 4 and 5s are probably on the ball more than anybody else in the game. And it doesn't mean that it's always in our defensive third. Even if we get into the box and we don't like it, we knock it back and we start over, and we knock it back to our 4 and 5. And like I said, they are responsible for dictating the attack with ball movement. And with that, they have to have good range of passing, because we talk about, when I talk about possession, who can tell me, and this is a trick question because I'm asking for myself and what I think it is, who's brave enough to think, or to say what they think the point of possession is? What's the point of possession? It's a general question. I'm looking for a specific answer, so it's a little tricky. Anybody? What's the point of possession? What you got?
Mario has a comment here. Go ahead, Mario.
To make the defense tired and then counterattack.
To make the defense tired and then counterattack. Okay, you're on the right road. I like it. I get, my pet peeve is when people just say to keep the ball. So I like that. I like to counter. I like that idea. Anybody else want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, Hayden has something.
Hayden, what do you have?
Hayden?
You cut out, Hayden. You're on mute, bud.
To keep the ball on the other team's half.
Okay. So to keep the ball on the other team's half. I like that. I like that we're attacking minded. Good. Anybody else? What's the point of possession?
David Cosgrove has a comment.
Ooh, Cos, what you got?
Score goals.
Yeah. So the point of possession for me is to unbalance the other team. So once we win it, right, and our 4 and 5 can play here, they maintain and retain possession. We want to get all those red players here, and then we want to go score a goal. So we want to unbalance the other team. So the point of possession for me is to unbalance the other team, and it starts with us, with our 4 and 5. And if our 4 and 5 don't have a good range of passing, it's going to take 700 passes to get to their goal, which sometimes is good, right? That's okay. But if I can get from point A to point B in one straight line, I'm going to go ahead and do that. I don't need to go 18 zigzags just to get there. It doesn't mean that every time I get it, I'm trying to smash it forward, but it also means I'm trying to unbalance the other team by getting numbers up, right? They come in pressure, we get numbers there, then we play somewhere else where now we have numbers up, and then as Cosgrove said, then we can go score a goal, okay? Back to the attacking phase, you want to give passing outlets. I can't see the rest of my, there we go. Passing outlets for the keeper, so those are forward options. Going into the transition phase, They want to organize and direct other teammates. One of our expectations for our center backs is that at least one of them has to be a leader, and they have to be a vocal leader. It can't be two quiet, timid kids that just kind of want to fly under the radar. You can have different types of kids, right? You can have the quiet kid that is a destroyer and the loud, cheery kid that bosses people around, fine. But ideally in this system of play, you have to have at least one of them that's a vocal leader, so that they're organizing the people in front of them and behind them with the goalkeeper. Protect the space behind. We'll talk about a visual cue. So if the opposing team's 10 puts her head down and takes that big touch, those 4 and 5s have to drop and protect the space behind because they know a big ball is coming. It's also forward pass when we win it. So my 05 surf team right now is 100% possession oriented. We want to have the ball. We don't want to defend. We want to dictate how the tempo of the game. We want to dictate what the other team has to do. We want them to change formations. Those are all wants. It doesn't always happen. But we want our 4 and 5 in the transition phase to play forward. I don't want our 4 and 5 to win a ball and play a 30-yard ball back to the keeper because they think that's the safest thing to do. And again, it goes back to your phases. Is it green, yellow, red, however you want to describe that. Then some of the defensive responsibilities just for these guys are set pieces, right? Like they have to have a ball winning mentality. You can't have a 4 and a 5 again that wants to hide. If you're a 4 and a 5, you should want to win the ball, right? When I played for Roberto on our summer league team, I played center back and he made us do this drill. I will never forget of pretty much me being in the 18 and then kids just running in, and all I had to do was go and clear the ball, and we played it for like 30 minutes before the concussion protocols were in place. But it was like the best drill but the most tiring drill, and I loved it but was exhausted afterwards. But you have to be someone that wants to go win the ball. You have to slide tackle with both feet. You have to receive a ball out of the air, and it's attacking and defending and then play out of pressure. And then again, that leadership piece, you have to lead the back line. And these are all different, right? So if you're a 2 or a 3, these responsibilities are different. If you're a 9, the area of the field that you cover is very different. If you're a 10, your transitional responsibilities are very different within this system. So going back to the 1-4-3-3. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on this slide?
Yes, Kate. Hayden has a question for you.
Yes, Hayden.
Wouldn't the goalkeeper be the number 1 connection?
With who?
With the defensive line.
I guess I'm not quite sure what the question is. Are we talking about relationships or the
relationships,
expectations?
The relationships.
So yes, 100%. You're spot on. So there's 5 main relationships with what's called them field players. And then the 6th relationship is always with the center backs. But we go with 5, because then if we go to 6 and you add one more and it goes to 7, and then it's hard to remember. It's kind of like core values. If you have 19 core values, they're hard to remember. I want everyone on the field to know that the 3 is with the 11. And even if you play the 9, you should know that the 10 and the 8 have a relationship. But the 100%, you see those little yellow lines? Like that's the 6th relationship, and it's always there. Like I said about Paul Nagy, I can't leave the keepers out, otherwise he'll hunt me down. So you're spot on. Any other questions? Good question, Hayden. Okay, moving on. All right, so now let's talk about positional responsibilities in a bigger group. So this far left diagram is also showing flexibility within your system of play, because if you look at this system of play here, right, it doesn't look like a typical 4-3-3 that we talked about, right? It's almost like a 4-1-3-2. But this is a goal kick. So the red team, I know Walter just did his US soccer license, and if you don't have the blue guys going up and the red guys going down, you're in big trouble. So we are talking about the blue team pressing on a goal kick. So each one of these players has a positional responsibility on this defensive goal kick. And we talk a lot about know your role, but also commit to it. So now it's a team effort. We all have to defend together. And if one person says, I don't really want to do this, big trouble. So the 10 here is usually an attacking mid, but we start in for this learning purpose, we start with the 10 and the 9 at the top of the box. New rule, you can play inside the 18. So the 10's sole responsibility, not win the ball, not score a goal, is to get that 4 to play wide and not let them play back to the keeper and change the point of attack. So we talk a lot about set pieces and how set pieces are so important. And I think people always want to talk about corners or defending a set piece outside the box. For me, a lot of it is goal kicks. We score a lot of goals on goal kicks, and we start our attack on our goal kick. And I think if you know your role, and you can be a 9 or a 10, this is interchangeable here, but we start with 2 players at the top of the box, and then you can see each one of these players has an individual responsibility once that ball is played. So once that ball is played, we want the 10 to make a curving run to make sure that 4 can't play back. And then once that happens, the next slide I'll show you, we have a little trap zone within the run of play. This is where we want to win it. So now as that ball is played, this arrow now says, okay, now the 9 comes and screens their 10. The 8 screens, comes and screens their 6. Our 8 screens their 10. The 6 keeps the balance, right? And then the 7 and the 2, they squeeze. I don't care what that 11 and 3 are doing on the other team. They can stay over there. They can squeeze. Not my problem, not our problem. We want to squeeze and make the field this big, and then we want to trap them in there. But if our 9 is huffy because she just missed the goal and is still thinking about that, and they play here and it somehow gets back and now it gets played into their 6, now we have 4 players that are now not behind the ball and trying to press. So again, it goes back to that responsibility of you as a player, but then collectively when you're defending. And now we'll talk a little bit about when you're attacking. So now this second slide, little diagram in here, is talking about where you start on our goal kick. And again, we talk about systems of play and how flexible they can be, because if you look at this, if you go back to this slide, we talked about just having 1 6, but now when you go into here, we're building with 2 6s. That 8 becomes a second 6, okay? And kind of where you start. And if you put your lines on the field, if you go back, however you break your field up, you might say, hey, 7s and the 11s, you live in the half space. 9, you live in the central channel, right? And then 2s and 3s, you're in the wide channels. That's where you start. And then you kind of see how this spacing is important in terms of how we want to build. So we have, you can have 100 different builds, but let's just say we have 2 builds. One build is when we build with 1 6, and now this is our build when we have 2 6s. So anytime our 8 drops down and sits on that 18, our players should know, okay, my role and my responsibility changes based on having 1 6 or 2 6, because now there's going to be positional rotation. So if we build with 2 6s, the weak side 8 drops in, the 6 now becomes, the 6 now becomes the 2, the 7 drops in, and you can read those arrows. But again, if you don't know within this system of play, if you don't know your role, big trouble, right? Because if we play the 4, the 6 goes out, the 2 stays, and the 7 stays, and now they're pressing us, now the 4 doesn't really have any options. So it's just, again, talking about those positional responsibilities within this system of play, both attacking and defending on goal kicks. Does anybody have any questions about this, or comments, or ways maybe you would press differently here, or how you could do anything different?
I know that some coaches have their 7 and 11 like on the touch line to keep them wide. So like, what's the advantage of having them like closer in than wide?
Are you talking about when we build here?
Yeah.
So good question. We talk a lot about, again, relationships. So the 2 and the 7 are a relationship. And if you're asked as a 7 or an 11 within this system of play that I would be hypothetically coaching, if our 7 and our 11 would be wide, I would then tuck our 2s and our 3s in so that they're always offset. So we talked about relationships, right? So even in those transitional games that we play, sometimes I'll put the 2 and the 7 in there, or sometimes I'll put the 3 and the 11 in there so that they're always offset. Because if you have your 2 pinned to the sideline and your 7 pinned to the sideline, all their 11 has to do is just stand here, and now she can defend you and the player behind you. Does that make sense? But now if she tucks in here, now we have this passing angle, and it's hard for her to defend both of you at the same time. So now you have to make it, now they have to commit another defender. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Good question. All right. Last slide. So this is positional responsibilities within the run of play. Okay, so now you can see it's kind of back to that 4-3-3, 1 holding, 2 attacking. And this is when the red team has the ball, we're defending. And we talk a lot about visual cues. You know, last week, Roberto talked about trying to trap teams wide. In this particular system, we also want to trap teams wide. I know that some people say, no, push them towards the middle because that's where the goal is. Nothing wrong with that. You just have to be organized and decide why you want to do that. One of the biggest things that I encourage my players to do is ask the question why. Not an annoying, why are we doing this? I don't, but why are we trapping wide? Why do we have our 7 and 11s tucked in, like you asked? Why do we have our 2s and 3s wide? Why are the 6 and the 9 relationships? Why is that a main relationship? So in this, in the run of play, we'll let their 4 and the 5 have the ball, but there's a visual cue in here that shows when we would press this. Does anybody see what that visual cue would be? What's the visual cue for that 9 to go cut the field in half and for the 10 to then step to the 4? The blue 10.
Once he plays it across the middle.
Yep, be more specific. What player to what player?
The 5 to the 4.
Correct. So anytime in the run of play, if our 10 can bump forward and get a little bit higher, I think this picture is a bit deceiving because he's very far away. Anytime our 9 can get into a good position to cut the center backs in half and cut this field vertically in half, and our 10 can get close enough to a center back, that's our visual cue. But it's only when the ball is played from center back to center back, from 4 to 5 or to 5 to 4. So when that happens, this is our mid-block press. So 5 plays the 4, 10 then pushes wide, and we wait to press. We want their only option to be to play this 2. And then as that ball gets played in, like I said, our 7 tucks in, and we don't worry about the 3, because our 7 knows that our 9 knows their positional responsibility. Again, it has to be together. If the 9 doesn't go and split it in half and our 10 goes bombing forward, they play around us, and now they're counterattacking us. But our 7 knows that if our 9 steps in there and sees the center back to center back pass, she steps into this space. Our 10 then screens our 8 screens the 10, and then our 6, because she saw that our 9 went, remember that relationship, now the 6 steps into that space and has that balance. Our 2 then has to match up with their 7 and take that option away. And if you play a 7 or 11 for the 05 DA team for San Diego Surf, you have to be able to 1v1 defend. It is not 2s and 3s, you defend, have fun. 7 the 11s have to be able to defend. And they have to be brave enough to go and close that space and have some confrontation. So now we wait, and then as that ball gets played to the 2, in we go, and we call that our trap, we call it our kill zone, we call it sharks in the water, whatever you want to call it that hypes you up, that's our trap zone. And we know when they get in there, we're collapsing, we're gonna get them, it's over. Okay, good? Any questions? All right, takeaways, questions. Hopefully you learned something new. Common language, questions. I can get out of this, stop sharing. There we go. All right, any questions or comments or concerns or suggestions for me? What do you got?
If you have a question, you can throw it in the chat and I'll pick it up and I'll call you and then you can ask Kate.
Hey, Walter.
Go ahead,
Can
Roberto.
I just want to say one thing real quick here.
Yeah.
Kate went through that presentation, and last week we talked about the 4-4-2 diamond. This week I asked Kate to come on and do the 4-3-3 for us. And I think the common denominator for everyone is, again, just reiterating, everyone plays a different way, but understanding the identity of your team, your roles and your responsibilities based on what your team wants to do, their characteristics, your coach's personality of how they set the team up, I think is the important part. And I think that's the important part for players to take out of this is go talk to your coaches. Go ask them, right? How do we press? Where do we trap? Where do we pinch? But I think I just wanted to reiterate as people start if anybody has any questions, right? I think that's important because you can have, I think Amy's on the line, Kaz is on the line, Walter, yourself, me, and Kate. We could do the exact same system in 5 different ways, and not one way is right, not one way is wrong, but it's important that players understand this is how we do it. This is our identity on the attacking side of the ball. This is our identity in the defending side of the ball. This is our identity in different zones of the game. So just as people start chiming in, I think that's very important.
100%. You're seeing this particular 1-4-3-3 system play through my lens. That's just my opinion, and hopefully you guys see it and can make it better and have your own questions and comments. And like I said, it's not to rival a different 4-3-3. I think it's like I liked watching Roberto to see how he plays a 4-4-2. And how, the next step is how do you play a 4-3-3 against a 4-4-2, or what's the best thing to play against a 4-4-2 based on your style of play. But that's a different discussion.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you coming on here, Kate.
Of course. Any other questions, comments, concerns? All right.
Anybody else have any questions?
Walter, I have a question for Kate.
Yeah, go for it, Dave. Go for it.
Hi, Kate. This is David. How are you?
I'm doing well, David.
Hey, thanks again. Appreciate you coming on and doing this.
Absolutely.
Just a question for you. In your system of play, is there a specific formation that you like to play against in your 4-3-3?
I like to play a 4-3. So let's say if I had the perfect world, I would play our 4-3-3 against someone else's 4-3-3, but they would only have one hold. So it'd be the same thing. They'd have one holding mid against our 2 10s. Teams have a really hard time against us when they only have 1 6 because our 10 gets weak side and it's big trouble. So I like playing a 4-3-3 against a 4-3-3 the same. Our kids get a little bit confused. Like if we were to play a 4-3-3 against the 4-4-2 diamond, they're a little bit outnumbered, but it's great because then it brings out different talking points in terms of 7 and 11s dropping in. But I like to play a 4-3-3 against a 4-3-3 we have 2 attacking and they have 1 holding, because the 10s that I have on our 05 team are playmakers and very, very smart. And it's fun to coach them and watch them solve problems.
Gotcha. One other question for you. Do you demand that your 7 and 11s, they work from box to box?
So we try to have our weak, no. Short answer is no. The weak side 7 or 11s just drops in an angle. When the ball is in our defensive third, we just try to have that weak side 11 be the outlet. Like our 9 will stay higher, so we kind of keep 2 higher, but the ball side 7 and 11 does drop back a bit. But again, we put a lot. If you play a 2 or a 3 for us, and the way we can do that is because our 2 and 3s are extremely fit and angry and like to get forward and like to run, and so they're good on the ball. So our 7-11s are fortunate enough to have those 2s and 3s behind them. I think if you don't have 2s and 3s that can defend really well 1v1 or even 1v2, because they're often left to defend against 2 people, especially on the back post, we take that risk because, like I said, we try to have the ball. It doesn't mean we always have it and we never defend. It depends on who we're playing against, because if our 7 and the 11s stay high, it requires their 2s and 3s to stay back. If they want to risk it and send their 2, fine, then we're going to leave our 11 higher, and now they have to deal with our 11 and 9 at the same time, and best of luck with that. But, you know, we played, my 03s played the Blues a couple months ago, and they had phenomenal outside backs that just, we played them a couple times during the year, but these, especially their right back, she goes box to box, and she made it really hard for our 11s because they're not used to that. But we try to keep our 7 and 11s higher to prevent their 2s and 3s from attacking.
Gotcha. Thanks, Kate.
Of course.
Aaron McCullen, you have a question for Kate?
Oh yeah, I was just, well, first, thank you. And I was just wondering if maybe you could discuss like what the biggest weaknesses of your system and like in what ways you've tried to address it, like compared to other systems.
100%. I mean, just even talking about the Blues and their outside backs, because we don't require our 7 and 11s to drop as much, if another team has some pretty dynamic outside backs, that makes us pretty susceptible within our system of play. We also keep our 9 pretty high. She's the person that sets the press, but we usually don't, I'm speaking about, let's talk about our 05s. We try to keep her in a more advanced position. But again, if we play a system that maybe only has 3 backs and those outside, so maybe we're playing a 3-5-2, and now, you know, our center backs are occupied by their 2 front. Now our 2 and 3 then have to defend their outside mids. But if the one center forward slides over, now there's an overload and our 7-11 have to come. We struggle a little bit with that. And like I said earlier, if you play a 4-4-2 against us, you have 1 more person centrally, right? But then you just have to figure out how to get numbers up against us, and you have to figure out how to defend us in an organized fashion, because like I said, our 4 and 5 are quite good on the ball, and the next person that's on the ball the most is our 6. She dictates the tempo of the game as well. So she'll struggle sometimes if the other team has, you know, a 9 that will drop in, or 2 10s as well. So and also if you play teams that if they match up with you and they man mark you, some teams will do that to us as well. Like they'll man mark our 9 and she doesn't really know what to do. Or we'll play a team that plays a 4-2-3-1 where they have 2 defensive mids and they will man mark our 10s, because our 10s are little playmakers and run amok and they're deceptive. And if they man mark our 2 10s, then we have to figure out ways to find separation where our 9 can then check down, or find that separation and then exchange with our 7 and the 11s. So we struggle a little bit with that. And the system of play and the style of play that we have is hard to do when you play on a small field. So we struggle a little bit on smaller fields, and we excel on 75 by 120. So even as U15s, we are much more successful on a 75 by 120 than we would be on a 100 by 65. We have a hard time when we don't have that space to spread people apart, or we talked about those center backs have to create space. If they can't drop off and create that space, now we have to solve problems differently. So.
Cool.
Kate, oh, sorry. Did that make sense, Aaron?
Yeah, I was just saying thank you. Sorry.
No, that's my fault. I'm sorry. Savannah, you have a question for Kate?
Yeah, I was just wondering, in your formation, like what do you look for in an outside back? Like for them to get forward, or for them to like stay back and mainly defend?
So within this system of play, again, their main relationship is with who?
The 7.
Yep. So if that 7 goes, we want our 2 to go. And we, you know, within this formation, and this is kind of surf, but it's not. I just kind of made it like a general 4-3-3. Within this system, you can also have, you know, your weak side outside back is also a really good transition ball. We talk about finding the weak side 10, but you can also find that weak side outside back going. If I were to show you, if I were to build out this fictitious 4-3-3 system of play and have the ground covered by a 2 or a 3, it would be a lot. We would expect them to go almost end line to end line, and not very central, but in terms of probably in phase 1 or the defensive third, they would have to at least go to the middle of the goal, because, you know, sometimes you have to make those recovery runs and we drop in at angles. But within this system, for it to be successful, those 2s and 3s have to be fit, and they have to be willing to take people on the dribble, and they have to be willing to defend 1v1.
Thank you.
Hayden, you have another question. Good for you, kiddo.
How would you play if the other team was using the exact same formation?
Depends on how they're playing it. I mean, that if we're going to match up, then okay. If we're going to match up, then okay, because if they have, you know, they would have 3 forwards, so we'd want to get our outside backs going as well. So we want to get our outside backs going. So it's the converse answer to what we talked about, our 7 and 11s dropping. We want to send our outside back so that their 7 and 11s have to drop. We wouldn't really change much. Our system of play doesn't change that much, because it's all based on our style of play. And again, this is maybe a topic for a different time. Our style of play is based on our principles of play, and principles of play dictate your decision making. So it doesn't really matter what the other team is playing, as long as we stick to our principles and our style and our system, if that makes sense.
Okay. Well, we want to thank everybody for partaking in this little Zoom series that we have. And again, we want to thank Kate for her time.
Of course.
This is an enormous amount of information. As always, I always learn when I hear other coaches talk, because this is really what it's all about. It's a soccer community just sharing ideas and thoughts, and it really promotes us as coaches and players, which is why we do this, to be able to look at soccer just a little differently. And as Coach Roberto said, as Coach Kate said, there isn't a right or wrong. There isn't, this is the best, this is the best. This is all about taking all of these pieces and putting them together to meet and match the makeup of your team and the personality of your team. So this is why we do this, so that you can take all this information in, and wherever you play, wherever you end up playing, here in club or beyond, it's always good to have this kind of information for you. And of course, I can't say enough about Kate, me personally, knowing her for many years and a personal friend. She has an enormous amount of information, and you could tell a lot of great questions, and she brought us a lot of really good material for us to consider. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. She really didn't go into all the complexities and the different layers, but it was good enough for us to at least start considering all these options of what soccer is. It's a beautiful sport, and it's a thinking sport. I've always said that you have to be a thinker to play this sport. So without further ado, we want to thank everybody for joining us, for logging on, and we want to thank Kate. Thank you for taking the time. This was awesome that you were able to come on and share with us. So we want to thank everybody. Everybody have a good night, that you be safe and stay healthy. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you.